Welcome, heathens and witches, to the Horn
and Cauldron
podcast. Yeah, so I'm John Norgrove. This is Julie Norgrove, and we're here to bring witchy information all up into your faces and such like that,
or your ear holes,
or your ear holes. It depends. Are
ears part of a face?
Yes. I don't know. Do ears count in facial recognition? These are the mysteries that we're not going to address here. Go somewhere else. But anywho, if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like this video, comment below, share, subscribe, and do all that kind of stuff. If you're listening to us on the podcast network of your choice, please subscribe and leave us a review so that way we know that you hate us. It's okay. What else?
Or that you love us.
Yeah, I guess that
share us with your
share us with your friends. Make us other people's problems.
Yeah.
Also, because sharing is caring. And so before we get started, I'm gonna give a little shout out to our Patreon. If you would like to support more witchy endeavors like this and fun stuff like this, we have a Patreon called Jive. That is like the main group that we use for the media name. And there's a Horn and Cauldron podcast here where you get access to the Book Shadows pages for each one of these podcasts, as well as there's a witchy Discord in that, and I make cell phone wallpapers and stuff like that, so that's fun. And we also have an Etsy shop called Norgrove Enterprises where we sell fun tie-dye stuff and embroidery floss. We have merch now for the Horn and Cauldron podcast.
Merch. It's so exciting.
So we've got a couple of Horn and Cauldron podcast water bottles we're going to be putting online soon.
Yep.
And we've got
some mugs.
Some coffee mugs because I drink coffee ferociously, and some stickers, but the stickers are going to be are coming up sooner or later rather than sooner, because I have to design 2 more stickers so we can sell a nice 3-pack to y'all, as opposed to a single sticker and having to pay for shipping for that, which is
outrageous.
Yeah, it's nuts.
But if you get some of the other things as merch,
we'll throw stickers in there.
We'll throw stickers in your order, especially if you send us a message saying that you listen to our podcast.
Yeah, if you went to the if you went to our Etsy shop and ordered something because of the podcast, or any of our YouTube videos, shoot us a little message about that. Let us know. We can throw in stickers and other fun special accoutrements like that. We should be having candles coming soon, and
corn husk doll
kits,
spell jar kits.
Spell jar kits. So we're gonna start getting into more of that stuff. It was just busy, so it's taken a time to get all this. I mean, these are supposed to come out on Monday, and it's Wednesday, so.
Yeah, but
there's not even an excuse for that. We're on vacation this week. We could have recorded on Monday, but 1, it was hot, and 2, I have had so many other projects. We needed the rest, but also so many other projects have happened in this house over the last 4 days. Since we jumped on vacation. But
also that's one of the other things coming soon to the Etsy store is god and goddess figures that have been upcycled out of Barbie or Ken dolls.
So we're working on that.
That's pretty exciting.
We're getting a bunch of things moving on. We should have some candles coming soon and all that kind of stuff. And give us a follow on YouTube to see the other stuff we have. We do reviews for Star Trek, and we're going to bring vlogs back because we've got the Scottish Games coming up soon and all that stuff. So, stay tuned for that. But now that all that business nonsense is out of the way, let's get right into it. Today, we are talking about rune casting, which is sort of interesting because Julie doesn't do rune casting, but she's the one that did the research for this. Just because she's the one that always does research for these, it's just she has a very specific perspective on these things. And I'm generally just the
color commentary.
That's racist.
That's not how that was meant.
I don't know. It worked.
That's not even fair.
That's not fair. No. Yeah. Welcome to racism. Welcome to racism. It's not fair. No, we're good people. That's not what we're going on about.
I just got canceled by my husband. Jeez.
I'm the commentary. I'm the color commentary guy. I got a bunch of information, and I happen to do rune casting. I have carved my own runes multiple times. Runes are within the wheelhouse of my practice, which is more Norse than anything else. So, it'll be interesting to see what she got, what they said, what I disagree with.
Absolutely.
Take it away.
Yeah,
I probably don't disagree with any of it, but, you know,
well,
I'm not
we'll
a fucking
see.
expert. Neither of us are experts, by the by. We are just some witchy people who want to share knowledge with all of y'all. And if we do something wrong or say something wrong or pronounce something wrong, because that's definitely what's happening, give a comment below. Let us know what's going on.
Yeah.
Mostly. Or hit us up on social media.
Mostly if I pronounce something wrong. That's kind of a thing that I do a lot. It's at this point, it's becoming a running joke to our three readers.
I want to say, listeners.
Listeners. Yeah, that's right.
If you're reading this, how?
On YouTube and with auto-generated captions.
I'm so sorry. There's no way it's picking up what I'm saying correctly. I talk way too fast and blur my words together. I know that for a fact. I would like to say that I'm able to, like, pronounce words correctly very well, but that might also just be me falling for my own bold idiot confidence. So, because it's like, if you got to do it, you just do it. You got to go 100%, right? It's like pouring beer, 100% on, 100% off. None of this fucking metering it with the tap shit. That's not how that pours. So, we'll see what fucking happens. Also, if this sounds better, and I'm hoping that it will, it's because we bought a new microphone, which should make things better.
Yes, and that is a huge thanks to our patrons for that, because they are the ones who helped us make that possible. And so I guess with that additional interlude, let's get at it.
Let's get into it. What is runes?
So, well, first, before we start, I want to give a disclaimer to say that there have been and there are many runic alphabets throughout history, but today we're really going to be focusing primarily on the Elder Futhark runes, and that's really just because they're the most common rune set that you buy these days. Not that the other runes are less good or less important, or creating your own runes with your own symbols is not good. It's just that these ones are the ones that you can just like go on Etsy and buy, or go, you know, to some sort of an event and you see somebody and you can buy them there.
Yeah, totally. So, and Elder Futhark is more generally associated with the esoteric practices in like rune casting and like stave designing and like worship of the Norse gods and things like that. There is a younger Futhark, which is, I don't know if you talk about this in this at all, but younger Futhark is a more modern version of like Norse quotes, Norse runes. There are definitely, there's sort of two camps about runes, and I don't want to get into it just because like I'm not trying to start fights with nobody. This is like a cool place where everybody's nice.
But it is a very controversial
but it's a very controversial topic. There are a large proportion of people who argue that runes never had any sort of magical ramifications or associations, and it was purely a written alphabet, and it wasn't anything else. So I disagree with that, but that's fine, right? Like, everybody can have their own opinion. We don't need to be assholes to each other. The internet is good enough at that. We don't need more of that shit. As well as oftentimes you will find other non-Northern European Norse runic or alphabets, like symbolic style alphabets, called runes, but that is sort of the word rune as defined by like being a character that's like disnormal for writing. You know, it's like a different kind of alphabet, a symbolic alphabet, but not fully like Egyptian symbols kind of symbol, like hieroglyphs symbols, right? But it's like a little bit less than that, because you'll find a lot of like either made up alphabets like from other like esoteric practices throughout the world called runes. Sometimes, I mean, I've even seen like the Hebrew alphabet called runes when talked about, just because the person didn't know that that it was the Hebrew alphabet. So runes is sort of like weird, like sometimes they're called Elvish runes when you look at like Elvish and stuff. So runes is one of those words that has like a bunch of meanings, so you may stumble across some like weird information with regard to that. Yeah. But just keep that in mind, and you know, if you're asking questions about runes in a subreddit and they're like, no magic here, find a different subreddit. Don't argue, don't engage with those people. Like, that's a thing. I'm in both subreddits, and some of them are just like, none of this shit. And you're like, all right, man, let's take it down a notch. But and you can always just like message us on social, and we'll you know, I can help you.
Absolutely.
I've been working with runes literally my whole life, and my father was working with runes before that. So
yeah.
Like,
well, and a lot of the
videos,
the short informational videos that I do on TikTok are based off of questions that people have asked me or questions that I see out there that are commonly. But you bring up an interesting thing about runes in that they're basically like symbols, maybe sometimes letters from other languages. And the word rune really comes from an old Germanic as well as an old Latin word. There's a lot of different roots for this word, but they really all mean the same thing. And that means like secret or hidden, specifically pertaining to knowledge. Yeah. So really that's kind of where that is. But, you know, the Futhark runes, both the Elder and the Younger, have been a huge template for just about any sort of fandom that has runes. So you can see them in anything from Skyrim to
I think I've seen Elder Futhark in Doom. I'm almost certain I've seen it in Diablo 3.
One of the runes takes a big part of the Halloween movie mythos.
Yeah, what is that, Halloween 4 or something?
4 and 5.
4 and 5,
and 6, I think.
Yeah.
You know, there's a ton of stuff out there with runes, and I am a huge Tolkien fan. So really my introduction to runes were the ones that were in the appendices of The Hobbit and of Lord of the Rings, and I did not know until many years later that they were based on or some directly lifted from the Futhark runes. And Tolkien did base his lettering systems very specifically for the dwarves on those. The Elvish runes he did not base on that. The Elvish is a bit more a bit closer to like an Arabic or an Asian type of language where you have characters that to a Western eye look like they could be runes, but they're really just letters. Yeah. But runes are really kind of an interesting history because the thing is we don't really know where they came from.
That's a very common theme in these podcasts. We don't know a bunch of details about a bunch of shit. People are bad at writing stuff.
Yeah, at this point, I feel like you can make the history part that of my research like part of a drinking game. Yeah. So
how many times do we say we don't know what the fuck we're talking about?
Yeah, or that we don't really know where it came from.
That's fine.
So runes were originally the alphabet used by those living in Northern Europe before they adopted the Latin alphabet during the Christianization of Europe, which happened between the 8th and 12th century CE. So there's another drinking game item for you, because we basically talk about the Christianization of Europe in every single podcast. I don't try to do it; it just happens.
Yeah, it's just a huge thing.
It's just a thing. So the earliest runes that we have found date back to about 150 BCE. So like a little bit over 2,000 years old. And they were the Elder Futhark, and they were actually found on a comb. And that's the thing is a lot of this really, really old stuff, we only have evidence from stuff that has been pulled up from archaeological dig sites. So we don't have a lot of context for some of these things. And we're not really sure where the Elder Futhark came from. Or who spread them across Europe or invented them. But we just know that they happened in Northern Europe and just sort of spread westward into France and Brittany and the UK. And they also spread eastward into sort of like the borders of where Russia and where those who use Cyrillic type letters are from.
Cyrillic?
Yep. Cyrillic. Yeah. Not acrylic, like the paint.
That would be acrylic, and not Krillin, like the, you know.
No, I don't know.
I'm just Dragon Ball?
No, I did not.
Krillin? Okay, that's fine. Never mind. Different nerddom. It's cool.
I was not a DBZ watcher. I have nothing against DBZ. I just wasn't into it.
I love that show, man. I watched all of them. I love it so much. It's so good. It's just schlocky. I don't care.
Yeah. So the first runes we discovered, the first time that we've found runes was 150 BCE, but the first instance of them being used for divination that we can find is in a book called Germania, which was written by Tacitus, who was a Roman historian, and he wrote it in 98 BCE. And the way that so this would have been after that comb was made, but only like maybe half a century. Yeah. And the way that he writes about this in his his book Germania makes it sound like the practice of using runes for divination has been around for longer. And in particular, he says that signs, so these would be characters, runes, pictorial type things, were chosen in sets of 3, and they were carved into the wood of a nut-bearing tree. So you would cut down a branch of a nut-bearing tree. And, you could also sort of say that would even be a fruit-bearing tree, because there are some fruits that have nuts. Essentially nuts inside of them, like stone fruit. Please don't eat the nut inside of the stone fruit, guys. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
They're bad for you. Like, very bad for you. And so that's, kind of where that came from. So it was a nut-bearing tree. My guess is because it gave life or something along those lines.
Well, every tree has sort of like a different, necessary symbolism, and it may have simply been that, nut-bearing trees had, better wood.
Yeah, that's
for it, or potentially not great wood for fires, but good wood for carving stuff into, or something to that extent, things. Right?
Yeah. So that was in 98 CE. After that, the next instance of using runes historically, there's kind of 3 main pieces here, doesn't happen until the 800s. So we're talking a huge jump in years. And this guy, his name was Rimbert, and he was an archbishop of the church. He wrote the Vita Ansgari, and in that, he mentions that people would draw lots for divinatory purposes.
Yeah.
Lots being essentially like a stick with carved stuff on them. It is unclear whether or not it was a flat disc or whether they were more like actual sticks with stuff carved into them. That was also fairly common for that time.
Both are fairly common ways to build sets of runes, right? Yeah. You can do the flat coin style, as I call them, where you just carve it on the surface, and then there's the stick style, where whether it's literally a round branch that's just been sort of smoothed out in a place and the rune's been carved into it, or it's a plank, a small plank, that's flattened out of a stick with the symbols carved into it. But both are fairly common styles. Yeah,
sort of like a
domino. And it's just we use the word rune stones, implying that they're carved on rocks, and sometimes they are, but runes for divination purposes are sort of like anything you can carve it onto works.
Or paint it onto.
Yeah, or paint it onto, or whatever. Yeah. Generally it's made out of natural stuff.
Yeah.
And for the most part, it's not made with animal byproducts. It's just made out of nature stuff, like plants and shit. But that's not necessarily always true. I've definitely seen leather rune sets and things like that.
Yeah.
So again, that just depends on the type of practice you practice.
So in the late 800s, that would have began the Christianization of Europe, and that's sort of why this archbishop was writing that story. And the next time frame we jump to is in the 1200s, which is sort of the winding down of the Christianization of Europe, meaning that most of Europe had already been Christianized or had that introduced to them, whether or not the inhabitants were currently worshipping as Christians or a combination of pagan Christian hybrid or really just pagan and trying to resist. We don't really know. But in the 1200s, an Icelandic poet named Snorri Sturluson wrote the Ynglinga saga. And in it, he mentions chips that fell in a way that essentially said the king in a story wouldn't live long. And I know that sounds like, oh, he was a poet, so he's writing fictional things. Really, what a lot of poets did back then was they took stories that had been handed down from generation to generation, and they turned them into songs, and then those songs got written down and they turned into poetry, and that helped to make it so that people could have that knowledge and that storytelling side of things.
That's just how you had history, right?
You didn't have it really is. So he mentioned chips, and in this it indicates that he was talking about chips of wood that had symbols carved or painted onto them, and that they were definitely used in divinatory practices in such a way that kings and other noble folk, particularly in these stories, would consult them prior to doing something important, much like how in ancient Greece and Rome, people would seek out the oracles for guidance before they went and did something.
Yeah.
So based on these writings and archaeological evidence, which we really don't have a lot of. There's just not a lot.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of archaeological findings of like rune stones. There's a bunch of those. There's like the Uthbert, which is a sword that we found that has the word Uthbert carved into the blade of the sword itself. So like we have a bunch of writings and like letters written down and like runes and stuff like that on stuff, but like that doesn't mean that we understand like fully what's going on.
Yeah, especially because a lot of the things in that area of the world were made out of natural materials, which would have degraded over time.
Yeah.
They were less monument builders in the way that ancient Greeks and Romans were. So we just kind of don't know as much about them just because of the manner in which that they lived. But that's not to say that they were less intelligent. That has nothing to do with that. It's mostly that we just don't have a lot of surviving evidence, and we don't have a lot of people writing like histories of, and this is how this stuff works. Like we do have a lot with Roman and with Greek civilizations and with other civilizations throughout the world. It's just the closest geographically. So most of the evidence that we have for runes being used is really in mundane ways, much like how you'd write things down in whatever your language of choice is.
Alphabet.
Or alphabet of choice.
Language is spoken, alphabets are written.
Well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you, so we really have a lot of these more mundane type of things where we're seeing somebody's name on something or, something along those lines. We don't have as many like receipts in ancient Norse like we do in other civilizations that kind of help us to clue into what daily life looks like. But there is no doubt that there is stuff like that. Now we have found spells written in Futhark, both elder and younger. But again, keeping in mind, this would have been the written language of the time. So that's not to say that the runes were not magical, but also if you are an English speaker and you also write in English with the standard Latin alphabet, you wouldn't really consider that being a magical language. But you are still using it for magical purposes. So there's sort of that delineation there. However, the interesting part about Futhark is that both the elder and the younger evolved in a wildly different way than the language itself evolved.
In the spoken language.
Yeah, in the spoken language. The usage of consonants and vowels and the way that they were written and the sounds that the letters made were evolving at rapidly different rates, which indicates that something else was happening with the spoken language of these peoples and with their use of the written language of these peoples. And we don't really know what that is. That one's sort of an odd and big question mark because they usually evolve roughly at around the same level.
Well, we would expect them to in what we would classically define as a traditional culture. So if you think about it from the perspective of like the standard English alphabet and then American accenting, let's completely even ignore the fact that Canada, Australia, and the UK all speak English, but with like a differential accent than is possible within like America, United States thereof and therein, right? You could understand where like if even though we have all this telecommunication, we have all this spread, and we have all this connectivity, right? The languages have delineated. There's the Southern accent, there's like a Texan accent, there's like a Northeast accent, so you have all these different California accent. So you have all these different accents. So to me, when I look at something like this, and because I've thought about these things before, it's this function of like at the height of what we would call like Norse times or Viking times, right? There was a bunch of trade and a bunch of interconnectivity. So the language had to normalize into like, as an example, American English. But there's still different accents relative to locations. And then, of course, once that trade and everything broke down, right, now you have a group that speaks a similar, functionally the same language as, another group. but because of the isolation effect and time, their language has now altered in a different way, right? And so when you think about it that way, it sort of like makes sense in my mind that they would that the languages would diverge and merge separately from the way the written language is, because a written language, it's written, it evolves and changes, but significantly less, right, than a spoken language, because a spoken language can suffer from like segregation, drift, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Totally, yeah. Now, it's also possible that these runic alphabets grew out of magical symbols or signatures in societies that didn't really yet use the written word to communicate, or to communicate frequently, and later turned into letters with word sounds that mimic or make up ancient meanings. Mm-hmm. That's a very, very possible thing. And I don't really have any great examples for that, but the easiest thing I can think of would be the ampersand, which is a derivative of the letters et, which means et, which is and in Latin.
Yeah, part of the et cetera.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
So that's sort of a way that can be done, because if somebody was using these runic symbols for, imprinting a name, or like, using it for a specific magical purpose, and there was a sound associated with that, that sound would then sort of permanently be associated with that particular runic symbol, and then that would evolve into a language, which I think is...
Written language.
Yeah, into a written language, which would be, like, super fascinating. And then lastly, the runes may have also been born out of a union of symbols that had meaning, like these alphabet-type symbols, or symbols that were already standardized, meaning something, and a combination of bone casting or reading an animal's entrails. So animal entrails were often read at feasts and at other notable occasions throughout the ancient world. This is a fairly common practice that goes across oceans and continents, really. And, whoever it was that was reading them, they would basically either interpret the shape of the entrails as the animal was sacrificially killed and then cleaned so that it could be eaten, or at the end, when everything had been taken out, they would sort of toss them on the ground and look for meaningful symbols or patterns and things like that. And that might sound gross, but I mean, that's just what you did then. And you can definitely do that, but it wasn't really a great idea to slaughter an animal every single time you needed guidance, because you would end up without animals. There would not be enough animals. So then there's also bone casting. And bone casting, it sort of evolved in line with the animal entrails, and these also included other non-bone items. So you would have a bone casting set, and it's a very personal set, so it means something very specific to you, and each item inside of it also means something very specific to you. And you could include things like sticks and feathers and rocks and shells and amulets, and of course bones from either one type or a variety of different animals. And you would toss these down, and then you would interpret its meaning. But because these sets are highly personal to the owner and wouldn't necessarily be easily obtained by someone who lived even 50 miles away, it wouldn't be easy to read somebody else's set because you wouldn't know what the meanings meant. But it also wouldn't be very easy for you as a person to teach someone else how to read this set.
All right, and we're back.
Yep. So, using common symbols, something that like you would find in a written language, you could not only read your own runes, but you could also use that sort of a system to show other people how to read runes, and other people could read them as well and sort of give input. So it's quite possible that that runes as a divinatory thing evolved out of several different things and sort of pushed into really what we know today as runes. And I think that that's a pretty interesting way to think about that, because this is just the most common language that we're talking about today, but that doesn't mean that you can't create runes for yourself using any of the sort of principles, or change things up, or even mix and match from different rune sets. So as far as types of runes, you're kind of looking at like really 3 different main types of runes that you can use. And this is, again, not part of a specific language, but you have rune sets, which typically have letters or other common speech sounds associated with them. And many of them today have divinatory or magical meanings, and they can usually be made or purchased. They're pretty universal almost in their sort of meanings out there. So you can find a lot of different rune sets online. You can find a lot of people with their interpretations of the meanings, and you can sort of pick and choose what you like, whether it's a specific language or a material that they're using or a finish.
Yeah. Well, you're less commonly going to find when you use the term rune set. Generally speaking, I would argue 99% of the time they're specifically talking about Elder Futhark. It's just the set just means all of the letters written on some shit.
Yeah,
that's it. That's all that means, right? So a rune set would basically be like alphabet blocks, but written in Elder Futhark, right? Obviously, like theoretically, if you wanted the elvish letters written on some rocks or bits of wood, I have no doubt that you can probably buy those online somewhere just because of the fan base and stuff like that. But the like quote magical rune set unquote is the Elder Futhark letters. Sometimes that will include a blank rune, or like sometimes referred to as an open rune. Some people have symbolism about an open rune. Some people don't, as well as some rune sets will include characters like NG and such like that, and sometimes they won't. Again, it just depends on like who that person is and what they're talking about with regard to a rune set. When it comes to buying a rune set, some will tell you that you can't buy a rune set. Some will tell you that you know they can only be gifted or they can only be handmade, or there's a bunch of people want to build a bunch of gates to keep people in and out of stuff. But based on the amount of rune sets available and types of rune sets available online, clearly not everybody believes that. That would make no bloody sense then. So yeah, that is a thing that, like, you know, some people are like, you can only have a rune set that was gifted to you. Like, you can't even make it yourself. But, you know, whatever, like, ignore gatekeepers. And, yeah, for the most part, it's Elder Futhark. And again, what the material's made out of can or cannot have meaning to you. What color the runes are can or cannot. Like my rune set, the first rune set that I made, I chose the wood specifically for its meaning. I chose the color specifically for its meaning. And I chose a color, it was very expensive paint, because it was also made like, it was like handmade, like natural, like artesian paint from like Greece or Italy or Spain or something, some Mediterranean country that had access to the necessary materials to make this like incredibly expensive like natural paint that I used. But I've also like carved rune sets out of just like, here's the necessary, I want to say 26 rocks that are all vaguely similar, you know, let's get a Dremel tool out and rock and roll. So, you know, and some people are like, never, you know, you got to carve it by hand, or you got to, so again, it depends on like what you want to do, what kind of ritual you want to do. I mean, my first rune set was carved on a full moon after a storm on the hood of my Bronco. Yeah, I laid a cloth on it. Was the only thing that was at like standing height at the place that I lived, and I can't sit for very long. So
and
like,
you're tall.
Well, yeah, and I'm tall. But so, and it was a very lifted Bronco. But so it was like at standing height. So that way I was kind of working like way up here on the Bronco. So I just laid out a huge piece of canvas, carved the runes on that, painted them on that, let them dry on that overnight. And then the canvas that I carved them on top of, I cut apart and turned into the bag that holds them, and the altar cloth that I keep in that bag for that. So, you know, again, it depends on what you want to do to make your rune set or to buy your rune set. Let me tell you what, if you're into runes, fucking Etsy that shit. There are some rad rune sets. There are a couple of like $500 rune sets. These like hand crushed, like beautiful, like made out of solid iron work kind of sets. And just oh man, people are doing some tricky stuff way beyond my skills. So I'm like and we I might just spend money, but
and we might do some rune sets too.
Yeah, I've been thinking about making rune sets. We get a lot of fallen branches out here in the redwoods.
Yeah.
Bloody widowmakers.
And like moss and other forest bits.
Yeah. So I could probably do like redwood rune sets with like a natural pigment that I make myself out of like nearby ingredients.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know, we'll see. We'll see. All right, what's next?
Yeah. So if you're making your own rune set, you can not only use the Futhark letters, but you can also sort of create your own runes. There's really nothing that says that you can't go off base here. And some people will include bind runes in their homemade rune sets, either by adding additional chips into it or by creating everything themselves. And bind runes are a combination of runes that have been written as one complex rune, and they can be used in a multitude of ways. They're also popular as magical signatures and also in spells, and can be used as sigils. And you can use a bind rune for pretty much anything. So if you really want to put something together that's like abundance and money, you know, you can take the runes that are associated with those things or any symbols that you have in mind, and you can use those as a bind rune. Now, bind runes have a lot of different ways that you can put them together, but that's one of the things that's really sort of up to you. And that's also pretty similar to sigils. So if you're creating your own rune set, you can also use different sigils, which are
all bind runes are sigils, not all sigils are bind runes. Because logically, again, just, you know, let's think about the words that we're using. A bind rune would be several runes bound together into a single symbol. Whereas a sigil could just be like a crescent-shaped moon. That could be a sigil. That's not several runes combined together. That's just like a pictogram, for a lack of better words. On bind runes, before we move into sigils, but this also counts for sigils. So on bind runes, there is the open-ended descriptor for the word rune, which allows bind runes to be anything you want to combine. And then there is the like Norse esoteric practice of bind runes, which is specifically choosing runes for their proper magical properties to be bound together in a specific way. And what that specific way is, there are a bunch of schools of thought on that. Some people do bind runes like around a circle, sort of like the like Eggelmir and Vegvizir style like circular pendant thing or sigil. Some bind runes are simply bound together in a line, and some bind runes are stacked on top of each other, which is often considered a more accurate way to do bind runes, because when you stack them on top of each other, if you're stacking, like, let's say, like O and U, then you would also potentially get like a C in there. You could potentially get an F in there. You could potentially get so by combining these two runes, you also can potentially read extra runes into it that you did not purposefully place there, which is something that you can actively create or cancel by the manner in which you create bind runes.
Yeah.
So again, it's one of those, like, it's as open as you want it to be, but also there are some, like, ideological ways in which you can do this based on, like, practices by certain people or by, like, ancient groups or anything like that. And for the most part, bind runes are a product, whereas a rune set is like the reading thing. So you like you sort of wouldn't necessarily put bind runes in a rune set for a drawing, but what you might do, and I've seen this a lot, and I've done this before, which is kind of fun, is like you get your runes out, draw 3 of them, put them on top of like a sheet of paper, right? And then whilst sitting there and meditating, bind those runes together, right? And now you have like sort of affirmation of the drawing that you just made about that decision that you're going to do, which can then be like burned safely, do it safely, or
there's another drinking game
buried. Yeah, the number of times we mentioned fire safety, or buried if it's on like natural paper, you know, any number of things like that. So again, and I mean, like I have several like traditional Norse runes on my hand, as well as just straight Elder Futhark, as well as bind runes that follow a rule for bind runes that I have developed and made myself. It's just my thing, right? It's not like, and you know, maybe we'll get into that one day. Maybe I'll get into that in like a TikTok or something. But like, I have a way of doing bind runes that's different, but it's just like the way that I like doing it, because I like the way that they turn out. Like visually, I like the way they look, and I like the things that you can do with them. Insofar as I've designed 4 of them, and tattooed them on my hand. So like myself. So again, there's a lot up in the air when you talk about runes, but you know, we're trying to stay grounded in specifically Elder Futhark, just because that's the most common practice that utilizes runes.
Yes. Yes.
As well as the most common interpretation of the word runes.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. And if you are looking to add to it, you can also use sigils, or you can create sigils out of the runes. Like you had said, sigils can be sort of kind of anything you want. Sigils are really a combination of symbols and letters and runes, or any of those things that have a magical meaning. Yeah. And some examples are the Vejvisir, the Eshelmir, but also, you know, symbols for angels and demons, and even a pentagram. So if you feel like for your magical practice you want to add something like that to your rune set, you absolutely can. That's really kind of a choose your own adventure sort of thing.
I mean, sigil is basically just the word symbol.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's the word symbol, but with, like, bonus meanings. It's symbol plus.
Yeah. And a quick word about sigils before we move on and back to the rune sets and how to cast and read them and cleanse and imprint them, is that sigils can be created by anyone to mean literally anything, and they're often very, very personal to the creator. So it's hard to know what a sigil means if you're not the creator. I belong to r/sigils, and there's always a lot of people posting sigils there, and they're like, what does this mean? And we're kind of like, well, we don't know. Depends on who made it.
Yeah.
And that's very, very accurate. And they're typically laid out in symbolic ways and charged with very specific intention. But if you have a particular sigil that means something divinatory to you, go ahead. You can do whatever you want with your rune set.
Yeah.
That kind of bends those rules a little bit, which I think is totally cool. Like, get it how you want it.
Find the thing that you like doing, and then like practice that thing, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways that you can cast and read runes. Much like tarot, it's kind of whatever it is that you want to do.
Yeah.
And if you want to hear more ideas about that, definitely listen to our episode on tarot. I know this is runes and that is tarot, but really divination follows a lot of the same sort of rules or ideas and practices, as an example, regardless of what kind of divination you're doing.
As an example, if you listen to our tarot one, Julie does tarot in a completely different way than I do tarot. They're just like completely different ways to do tarot. But also, she's been doing tarot for a long time. I'm real new to tarot. I mean, the number of tarot decks I have begs to fucking differ.
I think you have more than I do now.
I do have more decks than you do, yeah. But that's just because I'm irresponsible with money.
You also have several rune decks.
Oh, I also have like several rune sets as well. Yeah. And I have a set that's just like monsters, like kawaii little monsters. I love all that stuff,
it's
man.
So fun.
And Kickstarter, let me tell you what, you want a bloody secret to getting cool tarot decks and cool rune sets and all that kind of stuff.
And altar decor.
Kickstarter
tarot.
You know what? Totally off subject while we're off subject. I literally just got one of the decks that I kickstarted. This is like no sponsor, but I'm fucking super in love with this deck. Julie found it and sent it to me, and I was just like, kickstarted. Fucking no question. Just, what is it, $60 in the future that I'm probably gonna remember? No, I'm not. Buy it anyway. I don't give a shit, right? That's it. Yeah, some of these things I just jump off on. But this is like a 70s love child, like hippie tarot deck that I'm super fucking in love with, called Moon Baby Tarot. And like I just got this one in the mail a little bit ago.
Like 2 days
like
ago.
2 days ago. Yeah. So again, it's that like you know, you like go on Kickstarter, go on Etsy, see what other people are doing. If you want to make something and you're crafty, rock and roll. If you don't, or whatever, like who cares? I've legit like just torn pieces of paper apart and just written like taken a piece of paper and write the letters, like write the runes out on a piece of paper and just like tear them off and then just like flip them upside down and spread them around. And I gotta draw a few cards because like I needed to do a rune reading and I like didn't have any of my supplies, or like somebody asked me to do something and I forgot my supplies, so I just had to make it up on the spot.
Or if you don't want to draw them, I learned that actually the Elder Futhark, and I think some of the younger ones too, are in Unicode, which is, you know, like when you type the specific like letter code in for the
I have a rune font. When you see all the runes in, like, if you sign up for our Patreon and you look at our the fucking Book of Shadows pages, or like if you follow me on Instagram, I post like some of our like cell phone backgrounds and stuff like that. I post about those on there. Heck, even the there's runes even in the Horn and Cauldron podcast symbols. So like I downloaded like a rune font for Photoshop or whatever. But Elder Futhark, especially Elder Futhark over Younger. I don't really know Younger as well, but Elder Futhark is one of those languages. Hellblade, Sinua's Sacrifice, which if you like Norse stuff and are like okay with potentially having a mental breakdown, play this video game. Let me tell you what, man, it's so good. It's about a lady, like a Norse lady whose husband got taken or whatever, and so she has to like venture into the afterlife, and she has like schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder, some sort of a mental disorder that causes her to hear voices and to like see things that aren't there, and they play it into this like magical aspect of being able to find, and this is an old practice, is like finding runes in trees or in like bramble. That's one of those things that like I do very, very frequently, where you're just like walking and you bring your attention is brought to just from this vantage point, the manner in which specifically colored sticks align in this tree, or like veins on a leaf, and you can read a rune into that as sort of like naturally seeing the language of the environment around you, kind of a thing. So, but again, that goes into like casting and reading runes. And there's like an infinite number of ways you can approach that, just like there's an infinite number of ways in which you can produce runes.
It's funny because when I look at nature like that, I usually see how or why Bob Ross put together the compositions that he did. You know, like something that I didn't think about until I started doing like painting with like Bob Ross, like a la prima, wet on wet style, or whatever you want to call it, is that when mountains are far away, they kind of have like a purple cast to them.
Yeah.
Unless you live in California and it's smoke season, then everything is orange colored.
Yeah. We call that style moist on moist.
No, we don't. We call that style smoke season or late summer. One of the fun seasons we have in California. Anyway, so yeah, if you want to cast and read runes, there's tons of different ways that you can do it. And you can also take tarot type practices and move them over. You can just kind of like...
do research. There's a bunch of good online resources for rune casting and rune reading. And again, if you have a question, just find us on social media and hit us up. Yeah. So a common way to do it is a blind pull, and that would be where your runes are kept in a box or a cup or a pouch or some other receptacle, and you shake them up or stir them up with your hand, and then you draw as many runes as you want or feel compelled to draw to answer your question. So that's a very common way to do it. You can also use a cloth, and so again, your runes are kept in a receptacle. You shake them or stir them up, and then you pour them out onto the cloth. And then this is kind of where that sort of branches off into a bunch of different places, because if a rune falls face up, some people use that as part of their reading. If a rune falls on the altar cloth in a specific way, they use that as part of their reading, whether it's face up or face down. And some of the altar cloths even have designs on them that indicate certain layouts or questions or ideas. And that's really like something that you can just kind of go as
deep as you want into that rabbit hole. And you can even use all of the runes if you want. You can use none of the runes.
Yes.
But the thing that I caution with this is something that I caution with any sort of divination reading is, especially when you're asking a question for yourself, there is always sort of a temptation subconsciously to try and read the best result that you want for you. Like if you're asking yourself, how's my day gonna go? And you see two runes, and one is like, your day is going to be great, butterflies and rainbows and glitter. And the other one is like, maybe you're not going to have a great day today. You kind of subconsciously want to gravitate towards the nicer of those things. So when you are doing something like this, especially if you're tossing your runes out onto a cloth where you are seeing more of them, you really want to caution yourself that you are not choosing the outcome because that's the outcome that you want, that you're truly letting your inner compass to guide you to the runes or even to the cards or whatever you're using that the answer actually is.
Yeah. Well, okay. So cloth on a cloth, right? Which for the most part, I don't just straight blind pull. I used to. I don't really do that anymore. Specifically for runes, just like out of the bag kind of a thing. So there's the shake up the bag, dump all the runes out. The ones that are facing up are the ones that are you're reading. There's the put them all upside down, kind of wave your hand over them. The ones that feel like you need to pull them. Right, and flip them right side up. There's the dump out some, and then the upside down or reverse reading is taken into account, which is a carryover, as far as I have ever read about, is a carryover from modern tarot practice. The idea that there is an upside down or reverse rune is a newer thing, but also the idea of a tarot card being upside down or reversed is a fairly new thing relative to the lifespan of tarot, which even tarot is again, a fairly new practice by historical standards. Yeah. Right. But so, and again, you can do it upside down, you can do it right side up, whatever. There's a lot of people who use a map, right? So you get your cloth has location based importance, and then when you pour the runes out, the runes that fall in those locations are the ones that are informing you of a thing, right? Whether upside down or right side up, or whether or not you take upside down into a reverse context or not. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, and these are just I just ran through 4 or 5 different ways. Yeah. And those are just the most common ones. Those aren't even some of the more esoteric ones that are out there. Yeah, yeah. Or something that you feel resonates with you. It's funny when you were saying you run your hand over the runes. I'll do that with cards sometimes too, especially if I'm doing a single card reading. It can be really nice and just sort of satisfying to just push those cards out into a fan. And when I put my hand over them, I sort of know that I'm meant to pick that particular card. Yeah, because it's just a feedback feeling. Yeah, it almost feels to me like I have a string coming out of my palm and it's kind of buzzing. That's how I feel that. But that's sort of a tangent, but yeah. We're all about tangents here. So in terms of number of runes to pull, this is again one of those choose your own adventure things. You do what feels right. And the most common number of runes to pull really are, you can see that this influence comes from modern tarot reading, because the most common number of runes to pull are 1, 3, 5, 9, and then it kind of goes up from there. And those typically directly correlate to different types of tarot readings. So really the most common tarot readings and the most common stuff I found out there, just in general on research for rune sort of polls, is one is kind of an everyday poll, how's my day gonna go? Here's the rune. You can see that directly corresponds with tarot. Not that people do this for runes because of tarot, or people do it for tarot because of runes. It's just similarity. It's just the similarity is there. Yeah. And same thing for 3. 3 is typically past, present, future, or another one of the sort of threes that goes with, and you can kind of do whatever it is that you want there. But, feel free to pull as many or as few runes as you want. I usually start, when I'm pulling something, to start with 3 and then go from there.
And like John had said, some practitioners use reverse meanings, which usually indicates a darker element of a specific rune. And this can either be that the rune landed upside down and you're going to be using that rune, or that the rune itself is oriented so that it is upside down, even though it is right side up and you can read it.
Well, and some letters specifically don't have their like Isa is balanced, whether it's upside down or right side up. I think Jera's balanced. I think Subulo is balanced. So there are some runes that upside down or right side up. Gebo is balanced. I think Gebo is balanced. So again, it's that like, if you want to take that as that interpretation, you know, maybe put a dot like you would on a number 9 or a number 6.
Yeah.
To indicate what your right side up and upside down is if you read reverse readings.
Yeah, and you certainly don't have to. This is really a personal preference.
It's totally true. I don't do reverse readings, but I don't do reverse on tarot or any of that. I don't do that.
Yeah, and I only do reverse readings on tarot if it feels like that's the right thing to be doing because of the way that I do that. And we talk more about that in our episode with tarot, but I think a lot of things from that episode kind of play into stuff with runes too. So, you know, if you're interested in learning more about some of that, definitely check out that tarot reading one, as we go pretty in depth into reverse and meanings of cards, and different types of layouts that you can use, all things that can be translated into rune casting as well.
Yeah.
And so that kind of pushes us into cleansing and imprinting. So we talked about this a lot in our tarot episode. It's always a good idea to cleanse and charge a new tool, especially in divination tools. But kind of where you decide to go with that is up to you.
Yeah. All right, and we're back. Cleansing and imprinting.
Yeah. So first of all, before we get into that, like we talked about earlier, you don't have to only have a set gifted to you, and you don't have to create your own set. That's really up to you. Whatever you want to do with acquiring a rune set is really your own personal choice. There is nothing wrong with purchasing one. There is nothing wrong with making one. There is nothing wrong with giving one as a gift or even purchasing a previously used rune set. That is your prerogative, 100%. Anybody who tells you otherwise is really just gatekeeping for either a purpose that they are not aware of or just the purpose of gatekeeping. Yeah. So to cleanse a deck, it's always a good idea to cleanse it, even if you made it yourself.
Oh, it would be a set, but yeah.
Yeah. You just cleanse one rune. Just a single rune.
I mean, you said a deck, and runes aren't on paper.
Yeah.
They can be in the form of a deck, but it's generally called a rune set.
Yeah, so...
you know, because a deck of rocks is a fucking insane statement on the surface.
I mean, if you had a bunch of, like, flat rocks... When I was a kid, we had this, like, piece of mica that was, like, a flat piece, and you just kind of, like, were able to, like, pull off, like, a leaf, basically, of mica, and so that's what that made me think of. But I digress. So cleansing is typically done with smoke or light, either moonlight or sunlight. It can also be done with crystals. It can also be done with visualization. Whatever it is that you use to cleanse your runes, just make sure that it's not going to degrade them. Don't soak your runes in water, especially if they're not made to be doing that.
If they're not waterproof, don't sprinkle them with water. If you're going to use smoke, is the smoke sticky? Does it leave a residue behind?
Is it going to stain?
Right. Some smokes will leave like a waxy residue or like a smoky residue behind, so you don't want to do that.
Yeah, and even light can be detrimental to them, particularly sunlight. That's why so many things, I think, are charged by the moonlight, but there's also some other intentions there that we could just spend a whole nother show talking about. But sunlight can also bleach crystals if you're using something like a crystal set or even...
it'll remove the color from paint. I mean, there's a reason why sun bleached is a term.
Yeah, so however you decide to cleanse your runes, just be mindful that you're not adversely affecting them or damaging them in some way. And once they've been cleansed, you would want to typically imprint them to you or sort of bind them to you. And this is just sort of getting them used to you and your energy. Some people don't do this step at all, and that's also 100% fine. So to imprint your runes, you can put them under your pillow or underneath your bed. You can carry them around with you. You can place them onto your altar, and just kind of wherever it is that you think you want them to be to get your energy, just sort of like hang around with them. And some people believe that once imprinted, you should never allow anyone else to touch them. This is, again, a personal choice.
This is dealer's choice.
Yeah. So remember, once they're imprinted, you can always cleanse them again. If somebody touches them, no need to freak out on anyone. And an interesting thing that I read about cleansing and imprinting, which unfortunately I was not able to find any additional information about, but I thought it was really cool and I wanted to mention it here. In my research, a Redditor named Norse Gale Heathen says that that you can also imprint your runes by doing a ceremony that involves fire and or ice, which were sort of two very important elements to the ancient Norse peoples, and by singing the rune names and also infusing them with an herbal paste and the maker's blood, meaning to create a bond between the runes and the maker. I would love to know more about that, but alas, I don't have any more info there. But really what that tells me is that if you want to create an elaborate ritual to bind your runes to you, or even to create your runes, go ahead. Yeah. Because honestly, that sounds rad.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds very, very like put on your magic robe and like do your magical thing. So really it's just kind of whatever it is that you're into, that you want to do with cleansing and imprinting. How do you cleanse and imprint your runes?
Well, for cleansing, I kind of just like put them in whatever altar space I have, and then like light some incense or some candles around them, and then just kind of like let that sit for a day or whatever. You know, I generally do it at night and then clean it up in the morning or what have you. And as for imprinting, I kind of, the cleansing and the imprinting are sort of the same thing because it's in that space. You know, I like to like kind of like fiddle with them, but that's also part of the like, I just got a new toy. So I want to like look at every picture on my tarot cards or on my rune deck, or like read through the book or whatever. But for the most part, I just kind of like grab at it and then just start working with it. And like in time, it becomes more specific. Like, again, it's easier to speak on tarot because I have a primary rune set, which is like the runes that I made many, many years ago, that are nearing their retirement. And then I have a couple of rune decks, like tarot style rune decks that I use. But like with regard to all the decks and stuff that I have one tarot deck that I have a travel version of and a full size version of, that I use the most often. And that deck is not only the most specific with regard to the way that I draw, but like the drawings communicate more rapidly to me and things like that. I have more of a connection to that deck simply because of use. So for me, especially with runes, the act of cleansing is sort of part of the creation portion, and the like unpacking portion, and the like putting it on my altar portion and stuff like that. And then all of that acts as part of the like binding portion of it. When I made my own runes, I pretty certain I put a couple of drops of blood in the paint before I painted the runes on them, because I carved the letters in and then filled the carvings in with paint. But that was a long time ago, and I honestly don't remember. But I'm pretty certain I did. Yeah, I'm not really super, like, ritual serious on the whole, like, cleansing and binding thing. But that's also because a lot of the runes that I do are, like, this twig looks like a rune. Or, like I've done before, we have a table outside that, like, during the winter, sometimes I'll just, like, when sticks and branches and shit fall on it, I'll just arrange them into runes and then just like leave it there to blow away. So it's less, runes are less about the like physical thing and more about the meaning of that symbolism. right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's a little different, but that has a lot to do with, and we will have to do another podcast on this at some point in time and talk about like the history of runes and like Odin and like the connection there, because Odin was like gifted the knowledge of the runes, and the knowledge of the runes came from an even more ancient source and powerful source than Odin. In those interpretations and stuff like that, I am reading a book right now about the frost giants and like the ancient frost giants and like other giants that came before Odin and his ilk. It's a fucking hell of a read. So for me, it's a lot of like research and understanding, and then just like basically constantly working with it. Until I feel comfortable. I have been working with runes for literally the whole of my life. I could not tell you the fucking definition of a single one of them. Not even a little bit. I mean, like, I could guess, and I imagine I would get pretty close, at least on some of them. But I actually have a printout of the runes that I got with one of my nice rune decks from Kickstarter that I hung on the wall in my, like, hallway of esoteric insanity. And, it's so true, though.
It is.
And I literally, like Julie's seen me do this a million times, where I'll be doing something or working on something, and I'll just get up and, like, duck around the corner at the wall, and then, like, all right, and then, like, go about it, keep writing, or whatever the fuck I'm doing. Because I don't remember them. I don't know what it is. It's just like if you ask me what the fucking Two of Cups is, I'm not going to tell you what that is. I don't know. Right?
Oh, yeah?
I don't know what fucking Sulo is. I just... It's written down. You know, probably some way smarter than me dude said something about, if that shit's written down, you don't need to remember it, but in like a way nicer sounding way than me. But I'm not gonna waste the fucking sunlight on that shit, guys. It's written down somewhere. I got it written down right there. That's what that is. Yeah, I don't know. I literally have had the exact same rune image, the one that she currently has up on her phone, on every fucking phone I have had since smartphones started. That same image. And I have to re-download that image like twice a year by the fucking by, because for some reason it disappears. I have no damn clue why it disappears, but it just it's just like, you should learn this. I'm deleting myself. And then I'm like, none of your shit. Re-download.
That sounds like just the Fae messing with you,
Yeah,
man.
well, that's exactly what that is. I should learn it and remember it, but like I have to understand how like warp cores work in Star Trek, on top of how like the rules of He-Man. I got a bunch of other useless shit in here, and so like sacrifices had to be made.
Yeah.
Right? It's a triage of knowledge up in this bitch. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that you don't really know what the rune meanings are, because like that's the thing that we're about ready to talk about.
Is the rune meanings? I know. I see it on the bloody thing.
I kind of want to like quiz you about it.
No, there's no way I would know.
Yeah.
I mean, Fehu is wealth and cattle.
Yeah.
Ansuz is like God and like ancestry and like Odin.
I'll give that to you.
What else? I think Gebo is gift and Hagalaz is like divine protection.
You
sort
got
of,
one, but not the other,
or something. Yeah. See, the thing is that I know what I'm doing with runes, but I don't know precisely what they mean. It's just a thing. I don't know. Well, it's written down. I literally have like 50 different ways of telling you what a rune is within like 10 feet of my body right now.
Yeah,
that doesn't include the internet or it written in front of me right here. I mean, I have like 20 books about this. Right? I've got all, my decks have it written into it. I've got the poster on the wall and stuff. It's just one of those things that, like, for me, it's better to, like, read it and refresh it every single time, as well as some rune sets and decks have slightly different interpretations, right? So I have very specific sources for rune meanings that sort of like tier up and down relative to what I'm doing, right? So I have the like standard picture on my cell phone that I'm always using, which is like generic reference, right? Like super baseline generic reference.
Yeah.
If I need a little bit more, I've got the poster on the wall. If I need a little bit more, I've got the book that came with that poster that goes into more detail. There's a website that I use. I don't remember what it's called off the top of my head. But there's a website that I like. Find a website that you like. that I use that has a lot more detail and information on it.
Yeah.
As well as once I sort of get into reading that rune, there are things, interpretations and connections and things that I agree with on some of my rune decks and like different sources of information. And there are some things that I agree less with. Just because for me that rune has kind of like a vaguely different meaning, right? Because I have like a runes familiars deck, which is like a rune and a thing, like an animal or a bug or whatever. And then I just have like what I call my water deck that has literally no association with water other than the fact that the deck is blue. But to me, there's just a connection to water that just it exists for me. It's just for me because I'm crazy. So that's what I call this deck, is my rune water deck. And those two have slightly different meanings, right, for each rune because of what the author, and designer and creator put into it, as well as like the tone of that book, for a lack of better words.
Yeah.
Right. And then there are things that like I have researched and done and written down or tattooed on myself that has been lost to time because I forget. I have been doing this thing since, man, I don't know, I was like 10 or something. Where anytime I see like a dead animal on the side of the road, like roadkill or whatever, I make a small hand symbol while I'm driving, like a blessing. I don't know why I started doing this when I was a kid, but I always have. And it wasn't until maybe 5 years ago that I put together the hand symbol I'm making is 2 runes, specifically Gebo and then Hagalaz. I don't know. It's just something that I've always done. I have done since I was a child. Some people notice it and are like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I do a little thing every time I see a roadkill. And there are people that I have traveled like hundreds of miles with who have never said anything to me. And so either they think I'm crazy or like, they're just like, whatever, fucking Jonathan's doing weird shit with his hands.
Until
you don't notice it very often.
That you did it, I didn't even know. We're married.
Yeah.
We were married when you told me about this.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I think Dad might have noticed it, and we've probably brought it up like once or twice.
Yeah.
But like, well, again, whatever. Like, who cares? It doesn't affect anybody. I'm just doing like a weird, like hand gesture, right, for like all the roadkill I pass. I don't know. It just, it feels like a thing that I have to do. Like if my hands are busy whilst I'm driving and I see one, I'll wait until my hands are no longer busy and then like do the hand gesture. It only takes one hand and it's really quick, but it's one of those things. It's been a thing forever for me. I don't know why.
Yeah, well...
And what's Gebo and Hagalaz?
Gebo, based on what you're saying, a Gebo I would take as sacrifice, and Hagalaz I would take as nature or forces outside of your control. So you're talking about like a sacrifice of nature. One of the things about rune reading, and really like any sort of divination, but especially runes and especially tarot, is that looking at your cheat sheet or your book, as it were, that has all of the meanings and all of that stuff is actually really helpful. It's not a sign that you need to work on your stuff more. Although, like, if you want to memorize all that stuff, go ahead. There's really no problem with that. I have a bunch of them memorized. So when you said you don't know what the Two of Cups is, I immediately knew.
Of pages of other shit memorized that is not necessary.
The thing about not memorizing this stuff and going and looking at whatever your reference is for it is that while it may mean while when you pull like something, if you pull like Gebo, which is balance and divine interaction, gift, relationships, sacrifice. It may mean one thing in one rune reading, and you may memorize it as that thing, like Gebo means gift, right? But Gebo doesn't only mean gift. So you may pull it in another circumstance, and it may be meaning a different type of thing, like sacrifice.
Interpretation is definitely a thing. For me, Gebo is gift, but when I'm doing my like driving down the road, roadkill right thing, hand symbol. Gebo is specifically divine interaction, right? So it's sort of like beseeching the gods kind of a thing, divine interaction. And Hagalaz is specifically its transformative nature. Yeah. Right? And it's because it's a transformation between the mortal plane and the plane that comes after death. It's a transformation between life and death. So it's sort of like asking the gods to assist in this transformation, right? I mean, that's basically what I'm doing. But again, that's just because that's my interpretation of that thing, right? It's,
So
it's functionally the hand Norse crazy me Elder Futhark equivalent of God bless.
Yeah, basically.
Right?
Yeah.
God's bless.
That basically is like, you know, if you're still reading the book, you know, you don't feel bad about that. There's really nothing that has to be
I don't feel bad about
done about it. So with that, let's go ahead and get into some rune meanings.
Yeah, what are the runes?
So
all of them, real quick, fire them off. Rapid fire. Let's go.
Oh no, I'm not the micro machine guy. So the first rune, we're actually going to start. We're not going to do this in Futhark, which basically is the way that the language was written, kind of like on a keyboard.
Yeah,
it's QWERTY.
the letters are, the first letter is F, so it's F-U, the letter T-H, the letter A, the letter R, the letter K.
Yeah, so we're going to go with a more English version of this. We're going to start with A, and we're going to work our way down through the alphabet. So a lot of these runes have letter associations with them, which you can use or you don't have to use. That's just how I organize these to make things easier for me.
They all have a letter or group of letters depending on
or sounds
what kind of a thing association it is. And I don't think we're gonna go through all of these, but we will have all of these listed and it'll be pretty and all this kind of stuff on Patreon in our Book of Shadows page. Yep. So when we skip some, it's because there's, 27. So
yeah, we're gonna go through this pretty quickly. So the first rune is Ansu's, and honestly, I was gonna describe what these runes look like, and it's just kind of hard to describe exactly what these runes look like. So if you're listening along at home,
I'm way more interested to hear how somebody can possibly describe a rune.
Okay, well then I guess we're gonna do it.
No, we're not gonna do that.
No,
that's absurd.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's gonna take up too much time because
you guys want a 3-hour podcast, because
every one of them I would describe in a completely different way than I'm very certain you would, because I would describe them as like a function of mathematics. I would describe them as like vertical, horizontal lines at 30 degrees, things like that.
Oh my god, gross. Yeah, no. I'm
a math man.
Yeah, I was gonna be like, Ansu's looks like an F, but a capital F, but the tines point diagonally down.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay, so Ansu's is the first rune that stands for the letter A if you want it to, and it sort of means communication, inspiration, and knowledge. Moving down, we have Berkana, which is a fun fact that the rune is actually tattooed on my hand because we got a Tree of Life tattoo for our wedding rings, and we each have a rune, and yours is the Odin rune, right?
Which is Ansu's.
Yeah, you have Ansu's, and I have Berkana.
And she has Berkana.
So additionally to the meanings of these,
also, forgive these pronunciations. I don't 100, like, I know how I pronounce runes.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know how she pronounces them, so we'll see what happens here.
So Ansu's and Berkana are also kind of like king and queen type of symbolism, especially for us. So Berkana is like feminine and earth and healing and renewal. A lot of these runes, but not all of them, also have particular gods that are ascribed to them. But not all gods have a rune ascribed to them, and not all runes have a god. So have fun with that.
Technically all the runes are Odin's, and that's only because he sacrificed himself to gain the knowledge of the runes, which is fucking metal. To be
super metal.
To be completely honest, this god's just like, I need more worship. What if I sacrifice myself to learn how to be more gangster? And apparently, reality was like, we'll allow it, I guess. Sure.
Reality was just like, let's see where this goes.
Yeah.
So the third letter that we've got is Kanas, which stands for like a hard C or a K or a Q sound. A lot of the way that you would translate these runes is by sort of a phonetic thing.
Sure.
So if your name is CH, you figure out how you want to handle that. So that rune...
fucking figure it out, I guess.
Is like creativity and fire and knowledge and passion and positivity. Next is Dagas, that's D. That would be like beginnings and intuition and hope. We have Ewaz, which is typically spelled EHWAZ, which is the E letter, and that stands for adaptation and progress, relationships. Then we have Fehu, which is cattle. and wealth, because think about it, in the olden times, having livestock meant that you were wealthy. So gotta think about that way. And then there's Gebo, which is gift. And that one is like divine interaction or gift or sacrifice. We have Hagalaz, which is the H, and that one's kind of like delays and forces and obstacles. But then we have runes like Isa, which stands for the letter I, and that one's kind of like a blockage. Or ice. And it continues on down the alphabet here. And the last one really that I want to talk about is the blank rune. So we did mention it previously before. The blank rune is...
Before we get into the blank rune, some of these runes are like almost named for gods that represent the thing, right?
Yeah.
Just to get into like some of that clarity, like Thurisaz, right, which is the TH sound, is like protection and defense, and Thor, and is often associated with Thor. And it has that look. So, you know, it's more than just like a linear connection. There's a bunch of little things in there.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch here, and I'm not going to read them all because
we're not going to go through all of them. We don't have time for that. I just wanted to bring up that god connection because you mentioned it earlier.
But then we have the blank rune, and some rune sets give you a blank rune. Some people don't use a blank rune. It's kind of up to you. It is thought that the blank rune was originated out of being a replacement for a rune in case any of your runes in your set got lost. You had an extra. But a blank rune can be used as something unexpected or unwritten or waiting to be revealed or still yet to be determined. Yeah. It's sort of like I don't know.
Yeah, it's when you shake the magic 8-ball and it says come back in an hour and you're like, I'm sorry, what the fuck? What the fuck does that mean, bro?
Yeah. Right? So that would be what you would use the blank rune
I have a blank rune in my rune set, but I really only have it just in case one of my runes break. I don't use a blank rune. Yeah. In my practice and in rune reading, that would sort of be like using a blank card in tarot. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So yeah, that's just not really something that I use. Although I do have tarot decks that have like bonus cards. Yeah. I have that triple deck that I have has like a bunch of extra cards.
The closest thing to tarot that the blank card is the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune card in the Major Arcana is like, spin the wheel, let's see what you get. Yeah. And I've seen I would argue that of all the runes, the most open to interpretation is the blank rune. I've seen like a bunch of different ways to read that rune. Yeah. Like, so if you've been listening to this and you think, hey, like these runes are super cool, but like I'm missing whatever this symbol is, whatever this feeling, whatever this meaning is, you could essentially inscribe that onto your blank rune if you have a rune set and you wanted to do that. Yeah. So that's kind of where some of that talking about buying runes and sigils and stuff like that goes.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so that is it for rune readings. We hope that you guys got some good stuff out of it. This was a fun episode. I always enjoy when I get to hear more about how you do things.
Yeah. And this is like very surface level with regard to runes. The next large coverage in runes would be about Odin specifically because of the like necessary connection there. Yeah. You know, and his like, you know, he has his like poems about runes and such like that. So, but this is something that I practice more than anything else is like runes and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, whether people totally think I'm an idiot about this stuff. is mostly the interesting thing for me. Yeah. But okay, so what's our next episode?
So our next episode is the second of 3 harvest festivals. It is Mabon, or Mabon, however you want to pronounce that. I like saying Mabon, but like the 7th grader in me is like, she said bone. So
wow. Yeah, I don't know.
It's there. So I'm pretty excited
I say
about
it in a very like southern southern French sort of a mabon kind of a way, you know? I don't know why. I don't remember what the equivalent blot's name is. I'm so bad with the names of those blots.
That's all right because we'll be talking about it in that episode. Yeah. So I'm pretty excited for that because it's like fall.
Yeah,
and
Harvest Festivals is best festivals.
Oh, yeah, Harvest Festivals are the best festivals. So, yeah, stay tuned for that, and
we will catch you guys next time.
Yeah.
If you are listening to this on YouTube and you stuck around, thank you very much. Don't forget to like this video, comment below, share, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff. Let us know what's going on in the dibbly-doo.
Right.
Hit us up on social media. All those links will be below. If you are following or if you're listening to this on your podcast listening thing of choice, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel for these. They come out every 2 weeks. Not perfectly, but that's because
always
we have
every
real
2
lives.
weeks.
It's every 2 weeks.
Day.
It's just sometimes it's Monday and sometimes it's as late as Wednesday. And if you would like to support more of this stuff, we have a Patreon. So go to Patreon, look up Nerd Jive, and you'll find us there. That's how you're going to get access to the Book of Shadows pages about each one of these, as well as access to the Discord, where you can basically just like at us and ask questions about your practice, or we can share funny memes, or we can crack jokes, or just talk about TV shows that we watched. Like whatever's clever. It's just an open space to talk and hang out and be like cool, because I got a no assholes rule. I'm the only one that's an asshole, and I'm not that much of an asshole. So, yeah. You gotta be less of an asshole than me.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and if you're into some of our Horn and Cauldron merch or other crafts or kits or projects, we have a Etsy shop called Norgrove Enterprises.
Again, you can find all of that.
Again, yeah, all the links are on that. All that stuff's on nerdjive.com, as well as this is where the podcasts are actually hosted. So you can find all the links and all that shit there. And hit us up on social media and check us out there, because we share other stuff that we don't cover on YouTube or in these podcasts on that. Little stuff, fun stories, and the like.
Yeah.
But either way, I've been John Norgrove. This has been Julie Norgrove. This has been the Horn
and Cauldron
podcast, and we will catch you guys next time.
Yeah.
Stay witchy.
Yeah, and breathe in self-confidence, breathe out self-doubt.